This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Trip Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Tim, welcome to the podcast. Looks like maybe we wore the same shirt today.
Yeah. I think mine's supposed to have more lavender in it, but I don't know if you can actually see it.
Yeah, I don't know that you can really tell with these cameras, but it looks like we are wearing the exact same shirt.
Our podcast uniform.
Yeah, pretty funny. So we have to call each other next time before we come to record. But how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. Getting ready to head out of town here pretty soon for a little family trip. So looking forward to that. And I guess you're headed out soon for a Dallas leadership retreat, right?
Yeah, we are. We're going to be going on a retreat, which is fun. We haven't done one actually for a couple of years up here in Dallas, but we're taking our leadership group. We've really been focusing on just developing leaders within the office and trying to give more opportunity to those that are, have been doing an incredible job and are showing promise and wanting to take on more leadership. A lot of it stemmed from the book Traction that we've been reading as a company for years, the EOS model of leadership development. And one of their big things is about building a leadership team and the importance of it. So yeah, we're going to be going out to Park City, Utah. And we're going to be there for a couple of days, spending time together, having a lot of fun, just being outdoors, golf, hike, eating good food and spending time together. And we're going through Patrick Lencioni's book right now, The Advantage, which is another book that we read around the time we started DMRE. It's a really good book. Lencioni's written so many good business books as part of the Table Group and his consulting service. I think you and I have read all of his books. Like Working Genius is one of our personality assessments that we use with all of our new hires. That's an incredible book. He wrote that during COVID. And then Ideal Team Player really inspired us to simplify our core values to humble, hungry, smart. So that's another book that he wrote. Most of his books they're allegories. And so they're just stories, which is really fun and easy to read. This one is a little bit different. He takes several different concepts about culture and organizational health and working in teams, and then just breaks them down each chapter. And so it's a little bit more of an instructional book than just a story, but we're all reading that, and that'll be part of what we'll be discussing, and just, believing that our kind of superpower and secret weapon is working as a team, pushing each other, being vulnerable, attacking our goals together. And so Lencioni is probably best in the business when it comes to helping people work together and really think about organizational health and improving your culture.
Yeah, he's a really effective communicator, and his books are easy to read, and they're kind of paradigm shifting sometimes, like going from the way you do things to the way you can do things and how effective that can be. And so many organizations have the same problems that they keep kind of running into. And so he's great at kind of helping overcome those things, and not just saying you're a team, because I think everybody says they're a team, but truly being a team and leading. And I think there's always a growth process element to it, where you're constantly getting better and improving, and there's more room to grow. So that'll be fun. That's awesome. Park City is a really cool spot. I guess this is going to be a little bit more comfy than your last trip. Wasn't your last trip up to Colorado and you guys camped out or something and stayed at elevation and climbed a 14er or something?
This is pretty different than the last trip. Yeah. We the last trip was really fun. We hired some friends that have a kind of an outdoor adventure travel group, and they took us to Colorado, and we took the Durango train into the backcountry a couple hours. And the way that train works is you can get dropped off halfway between cities. So they dropped us off, and we were super remote. It's like the train shows up again the next day at noon is how it works. And so we hiked in. And it was straight uphill with backpacks, heavy backpacks for 7 miles. And some of us were kind of prepared for that. Some of us, it was pretty brutal beat down. And then we camped, and then we got up early and we hiked a couple 14ers, and then we hiked back out. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of blisters and sore muscles. And This
Yeah,
one's
really
getting,
accomplishing something. And the thing
yeah,
that's always hard about that too, coming from Texas, is the elevation change.
yeah,
So that's what I like about Montana and Utah. You're at a lot lower elevation. I can't remember what Park City is, if it's like you're at 6,000 feet or how high you are, but getting
yeah.
up
It's not
at
crazy
10 to
high.
yeah, 10 to 14,000 feet really, I mean, at least for me, it hits me pretty hard. It takes me a while to acclimate to that.
Well,
So
there's something about the mountains and being together, outside of work, but in a place that's so beautiful where you're getting to do things like hiking or mountain biking. And we're going to be a little bit late in the season for whitewater rafting. So, but we're pretty excited about some of the stuff we're going to be doing on the trip. And then, I think we'll come back really dialed in, ready to go and ready for this big kind of fall marketing season that we're always in, where we've stayed really busy over the summer up here in Dallas. It's been interesting. We've had Senate Bill 840, and then we've had just a really strong industrial market up here. And so we've signed up like three really good industrial listings like consecutively just the last 30 days or so. And so that's kept us really busy, just the number of offers and the interest we're getting. But the fall is always busier than the summer. And so we're talking to more landowners about taking properties out and expecting the time between now and kind of Thanksgiving to be a really busy, busy time. So this leadership retreat's perfectly timed to get ready for that.
yeah, our market is very determined by the times when people take time off and almost just by the school schedule. Because, yeah, the spring is a really good time to be in the market. It's a really busy market, pretty much January through maybe, April, May timeframe. And then you get in the summertime, and like you said, it slows down. Everybody's traveling. It's really hard to push things forward, especially negotiating contracts, because one or both sides are out of the office for a couple weeks at a time, and so it's just difficult. But then you get past Labor Day, and you get into the second sort of like hot time of the year, which is a little bit more condensed because it's September, October, a little bit of November, and then you have the holidays. And then once you get into the holidays, people are trying to close deals and they're trying to celebrate the holidays. So it's definitely a time to really get focused and geared up and really push hard. And especially, I think, with where we see things going into next year, where we hope things are going, this is a good time to be out, pushing deals and getting deals under contract.
That's a good segue into what we're going to talk about today. The kind of the top three things that a landowner should do before taking their site to market. And a little hint, the third one has a lot to do with what you just said. So
Yeah.
timing and marketing. But let's start with, what do you think the number one most important thing a landowner should do before they take a site to market?
I mean, I think what I would say is it's really important to talk to the brokerage community and get some BOVs, some broker opinions of value. And I think it's important to talk to a couple different people that are reputable, and just get their perspective. And I think you learn a lot doing that. Just think about, like, if you're hiring a contractor for your home, or maybe you're going to get a surgery or whatever it is, if it's something you don't really know a lot about, trying to find a couple different people that are reputable, that have, good resume and success, and say, hey, what do you think about my situation? What are the reasons why you would guide me this way or that way? And you learn a lot through that process. You get a lot more comfortable, I think, going through that process, and more confidence. Whoever you decide to work with and whatever route you decide to go, you're going to feel better about that, having had, multiple different inputs into that conversation. So I think that's important. And I would definitely say, make sure that they're reputable firms, people that have experience, who've done a lot of transactions. I think another thing is making sure that they're a fit for your kind of property. So there's different, land can be, acreage land, ranches, farms. It can be subdivisions. It can be industrial sites, multifamily, retail. So if someone's a retail expert, maybe not the best person to market a multifamily site or an industrial site. If someone's an industrial expert, maybe they shouldn't be doing an office deal. And so trying to just figure out, did they have a lot of experience in a site, my kind of site, whether it's an urban site or a suburban site. I think that's important. And then I think just getting different perspectives and hearing what people say, and then even taking some of what one person said and asking that back as questions to the other person, just to kind of compare and get feedback, I think is really good.
Well, I agree that, the importance of getting that information and interviewing multiple brokers is selecting the right broker is going to be the most important thing to do in this process if you're going to sell your property. And I would say to prepare for that, it reminds me of when my wife and I were moving from Houston to Dallas, and we made a list of everything that we were looking for and where we wanted to end up in Dallas, because we really didn't know the Dallas, housing market very well. So we were thinking about things like, you know, proximity to the school that we wanted to send our kids to and the church that we were going to be going to, because we had that figured out. We knew where we were going to be, the size of the yard that we wanted, how many bedrooms. Like we had a list that covered everything. We had all of that pretty dialed in. And then it was, here's like the non-negotiables, here's the things that we can bend on. And then you go and you start looking at homes and you start meeting with different realtors and go through that whole process. And I think as a landowner, it's really important to know what your motivation is for selling, and to have an idea of what you want to accomplish. Because if, let's just say, we're having this conversation with the landowner now and they need to close by year end. In our business, that's a very short period of time to get to a closing. And that needs to be known and understood by these brokers when they're providing an opinion of value. Because normally the way that we'll do our opinion of values will be, if you say, I want to know what I can sell this property for, we're going to tell you what we think, the highest and best use is, the type of buyers that are going to be interested, maybe even specific buyers, what they can pay. But that's going to be based off of them getting likely more time to execute and close. Once you start backing up a closing date, it's going to impact the value. And so thinking about things like, do you have a debt on the property? Is that going to motivate a certain closing? Are you trying to move to a new location? Is it taxes that's causing you to relocate? Like, sharing these things with the brokers ahead of time, like even providing that list of your motivations and what's important to you so the brokers can take that into their evaluation. Very similar to how you would if you're going out and trying to buy a house. We're like, this is what we're looking for. You'd be really frustrated if you presented, the realtor with, this is what we're looking for, and they came back and it was nothing that matched it. But if all
Yeah.
you said was, I just want to buy a house in Dallas, that realtor would never really be able to help you find anything, because they would just have no idea what you're looking for. So I think just as part of that process, going through the broker opinion and values with the brokers, it will help the seller a lot if they've thought through a lot of that, so that it doesn't just become which broker tells you they can sell your property for the most money. And you're not thinking about, do you need a lease back because you're relocating and you need a 12-month lease back? And does that broker have experience working on deals where they sell the property and then there's a lease back? And just a lot of different things that can be pretty unique when you think about different characteristics of deals.
And I think, asking the question why is great, because I think people will take a statement at face value. If someone says, I can sell your property for this amount of money, or there's this kind of activity in the market, just poking a little bit deeper and asking, why do you think that? What are you basing that on? There's a lot of times where people will say a lot of things. There's not a lot of foundational evidence behind that, or data saying, hey, yeah, there's several deals that have traded in this area, or this use type is hot. Here's some comparables of where it's traded or where I'm seeing activity. Here's other offers that are happening. Whatever the scenario is, where they can back up what they're saying. Because what you don't want to have happen is someone says a lot of really great things, because it's really like it's a job interview. And we found out just interviewing people and hiring people for our company, people tend to say what they think they should say in a job interview to get the job. And so you're trying to kind of dig behind and say, are they just saying this, or is there something real behind it? And I think brokers are the same way. There's a lot of folks that are, slick talking, they know what to say. They're engaging, they have a great personality. But is this all talk, or are there actual, is there real world experience behind it? And is there real data behind what they're saying? And are they honest? Because an honest broker will say, this is what I think, but I don't really know. Like, the market hasn't been tested in this way. There haven't been trades in this area for a while. They'll be honest with you and tell you where they don't know something, and then they'll tell you where they have confidence in something. I think that what you're looking for is a partnership where you can really work together with this person. They can be a guide for you, and you can trust them. Because if you don't trust them, that it's not going to be a very good relationship, and it's not going to lead to the healthy outcome that you're hoping is going to lead to.
Yeah. And I think that as you're talking about other areas of life where you're having the same, like, how are you evaluating similar decisions? like when you have work done on your home, we've both had that where we've had, contractors come and you're trying to figure out it's not really your expertise. And so you're trying to weigh like, there's like the less expensive one where you're gonna have to kind of be more involved. And then there's like the really expensive one where you don't have to be involved at all. But then you're like, is there somebody in between? Or like, or what's important to me? Is this such a, is my goal? I'm willing to pay the money. I just got to get it fixed. Or, am I willing to be more involved in it? It reminds me a little bit of when we're having commission conversations with sellers and sellers being careful not to make that too big of how they're making their decision in selecting a broker. Because we'll talk about this a lot. There's brokers that buy the business on one end of the spectrum, which means that they're almost willing to work for not free, but like almost just like their time at the end of the day because these deals take so long and what the commission will be to cover their overhead and their expenses and their time. And then there's brokers that are like, I won't do it for less than 6% no matter what. It's like, that's my number. Like no matter how big the deal is, I never come off my fee. So those are kind of like the two ends of the spectrum. What we've done in the past is there's been times where we've been willing to do it for less because we're evaluating, the opportunity costs that we would have of not taking the business or taking the business. There's been times we've said we can't do it for that low of an amount because our team and the time this is going to take, like we wouldn't really be in business if we were, reducing our fees that much. And so as a seller, just being careful that you don't focus too much on that because, the difference of like half a point on a fee, that might be like, wow, that's, $50,000 or whatever it is that I'm gonna have to pay. But what if picking the right broker is a transaction actually happening, or maybe even an increased purchase price of $3 million. These are real things we see where picking the right broker can result in much higher pricing, much higher likelihood of closing, way more streamlined process. So I think that that's just important to remember, is be careful. You're not so focused on the cost side that you're not seeing the value side as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point on the fee. It's great if someone is flexible on the fee and we try to be fair and as flexible as we can be. But then at the same time, you want a really competent person who's going to work really hard. And those people typically have to get paid, and if someone's willing to do something for free or something for not free, but for very below market, that should be a big red flag. They have nothing else to work on. Are they just starting out? Is this a part of the business where they don't have experience? They're trying to get experience. They're buying the business to get that experience. So I think that's it's important. I mean, if you're a seller, that you're gonna pay this person a lot of money, so you want to make sure you feel good about that. And so it's an important conversation to have, but not to make that the sole basis. And we've seen that in the past where people that's the sole basis for the decision, and a lot of those are not good outcomes when that's what drives the ship.
I think the second thing I'd say, so the first one, to your point, is go meet with maybe 2, 3 brokers, get broker opinion and values, understand their value for your property, their experience, their track record, how they would market your property. I think the second one would be making sure that you have adequate due diligence to take your property out to market. And so, if you're trying to sell the type of properties we work on, which, can range anywhere from, 5 to 100 million, depending on what the property is, spending the money necessary to have like a survey, an accurate survey or an updated survey is going to be well worth it so that a developer can lay out their project, do a site plan, actually evaluate what they can put on the property. And then that's really how they're going to determine what they can pay for the property. And I know this isn't surprising to you, Tim, because you've seen this in Houston and we've both seen it for years. There's sellers that just won't spend any money. They want to sell for, an enormous price, but they're not really willing to spend any money to go do a little survey work, just a little bit of due diligence that would really help the buyer evaluate the property and make really what's an educated offer. And so survey is kind of a bare minimum. And then there's depending on the specific property, there could be other things that you would want to do. And I think that's where asking those type of questions to the brokers when you have the BOV, you already know about a survey, but can they help you get connected to, a good real estate attorney if you don't have one? Because that's gonna come in really handy as you get into the process. You don't want to get in a situation where you're picking that attorney because you have to kind of last minute because you may not get someone that you got to interview and it might be, more expensive than you needed it to be. So asking like what consultants would be good for me to know. Are there any other reports that would be helpful? And a lot of times you don't need to do a whole lot. It's really the survey is what's going to be important. But asking the different brokers and then really just weighing the whys, like you said, ask why. If they're like, well, you need to go do, hire a civil engineer and do a feasibility study and hire an architect and draw a site plan or elevations, or hire a zoning consultant and go zone the property. It's like, why? And then
Yeah.
asking, have you seen that work in the past? Like, can you give me an example of where that worked? Because I think you and I see a lot of these properties that they'll hit the market and they have a really pretty package. They spend a lot of money on site planning, and we'll talk to our developer about it. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't work. We're not going to do that. But do they have a survey? Let's look at the survey and let's go, or they'll
Yeah.
say, the owner just zoned it. An email came across the other day, and Trey here was asked one of the guys, he's like, so what are they zoning it for? Because that's another problem. It's like, well, they zoned it, but then a lot of times they actually missed the market on how they zoned it.
Yeah.
They wanted, industrial zoning because they heard that that's a good use, or they wanted multifamily. The zoning they got was industrial with office finish, high finishes.
Gosh.
It's like, well, that's a totally different,
Yeah.
product. Or they got multifamily with ground floor retail. And, it's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, that's not really sellable in a lot of cases. So I think that just asking those questions, but then trying to evaluate through the whys and then asking for examples. Because I think to your point, it's not that the broker is going to have experience in everything, but they need to be able to articulate and talk through examples of when it's worked, maybe when it didn't work, and just being honest, about what they've seen.
I think what you're looking for in that stage is where are the deal killers or where are the deal hurdles? Because a lot of these sites will have really good things about them. And so you want to get very clear on where are the strengths of the site. Maybe it's the road frontage, maybe it's the submarket, maybe it's the size of the site or the dimensions of the site. But then there may also be some other challenges, which could be deal killers if they're not handled properly. And so sometimes you can't figure those out beforehand, but you can understand what the challenge is and what's the path to figure it out. So maybe it's being annexed in the mud. So I agree with you. You don't want to go spend money on a feasibility study, but it's great to go talk to the engineer and have a conversation and get a feel for, for what the opportunity is there. If there is a wetlands issue, having or a potential wetlands issue, having a cursory conversation with an engineer and saying, hey, is this a big issue or is this, probably not a big issue? But trying to understand what could be those things. Because once we go to market, we're going to have to talk to buyers and they're going to bring these things up. A good buyer will bring everything up. And so you're in such a better position. I love a lot of times when I'm marketing a property to lead with some of the problems on the property because I know they're going to find those and then explain what we think the path is to solve those problems. Because that's where you neutralize the issues. And then you can
Mhm.
talk about after that, talk about all the good things about it and why they should buy it. And you can get people on board to buy it. But I think really getting to a sense of what's really going on with this property. And there might be some significant challenges that we have to overcome that are just things that have to be overcome to sell the property. Because we're not going to get lucky and have someone spend a ton of money and not do any due diligence because we just don't see that happening on these big institutional deals.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's times too where if it's a well-located property and it's just really complicated, I've seen the ability for maybe there is more work that needs to be done on the due diligence side, and the owner really doesn't want to get in a position, and maybe isn't in a position where they can spend 50 to $100,000 on like hiring engineers and looking at the topography and doing tree surveys and all these things. So then there is an element of you can find a qualified developer that is going to be willing to go do that. You just have to recognize there's going to be extended time. And there's also going to be likely some kind of a discount on the land because you're basically saying, I wasn't able to tell you what I really have. And so the developer is going to have to go figure that out. And there's some kind of a trade-off in value because a lot of developers aren't going to be willing to take on what we would call like more hairy, just challenging projects like that.
Yeah, maybe rezoning a site, or annexing it into mud. If there's environmental is a big concern for developers, depending on how significant it is. I do think though that, our experience working with a lot of developers, we know that there's some developers who will penalize sellers for stuff like that and go do the work and then bring back a laundry list of stuff to retrade the price. And then there's developers who don't do that. They'll go figure everything out and they'll just absorb it and just go do the deal. And we've seen both sides of that. And so we tend to try and work with the group so we can get them on a site. They're more about getting the deal done, and they're not going to ever retrade unless there's a material issue that really just fundamentally changes a deal.
So if the first thing sellers should do is meet with these brokers, get a BOV, ask questions, really have thought through why you're selling. And then the second thing would be getting a survey, and through the questions you've asked the broker, seeing is there anything else unique about your property that you should be accounting for. I think the third thing, and there's other things, but the third thing that I think would be really important would be understanding and having a clear expectation on how is the property going to be marketed and what's the marketing process going to look like. Traditional land brokerage, and we've talked about this on the podcast before. It's a lot of, I'm going to put a sign up. I'll, put it on something like a LoopNet or Crexi or CoStar, and I'll do it what we would call it pretty passive marketing, and I'll just kind of see who comes to me. And that's why a lot of listing agreements you have co-broker fees, because there are other brokers that bring offers, and it's just kind of always been a recognized part of the business. Like I list the property, but I'm probably not going to find the buyer. And I think we've always taken an approach that's much more aggressive in how we market to say, because land does sit there. We've seen these sites that have sat there for years and years, and have never sold. It's important that you go out to the market aggressively and try to bring the buyers to the market. You really just can't assume that people that want to buy your property are going to be driving past it. You have to get them to come to it. You have to get them to drive past it. And so we've always taken a more targeted approach by really understanding what is the market, getting their contact information. So we have their direct email addresses, their phone numbers, and we can call them directly. We can send them information over email. And that's how you can generate, multiples of offers in short periods of time and create these competitive bid processes. Now, every site's not that kind of a process where you list the site and you get 30 offers in 20 days like we've gotten before. Some of them, it's just going to take time because they're unique properties, there's unique challenges, and there's just not a big buyer pool. They're good sites. They are going to sell, but it's going to take time. And so if you're the landowner, you want to understand from the broker, what's your marketing plan? How quickly do you think I'll get offers? And now the broker doesn't know for sure, but they may know, and we would normally know if this is one where we'd expect offers right out of the gate. Like sometimes same day we market we take it to market, or we may have to be out in the market for, a couple months because it could just take that long for a buyer to evaluate the opportunity because it's so complicated. And then there's not going to be as many buyers. That's going to help solve a lot of the friction between the landowner and the broker just on expectations around how the marketing process is going. And also maybe not jumping at the first offer or waiting. You get a really good offer earlier on in the process, but you've been told you're going to get 20 offers. And so you're waiting, and then that offer goes away and then there aren't other offers. So just understanding what is expected and trying to have the broker, again, kind of back that up on experience and what they're seeing in the market.
Yeah, I think having a discussion about what the expectations are around communication. How often am I going to be getting updates? Are they going to be written updates? Are we going to get on the phone and talk through things? And like you said, there are sites where we're talking, multiple times a week, or at least every week. There's a like a formal update, and we'll do that sometimes, where it's a very institutional client that has a site that's moving quickly, and it's a quick process. Maybe it's a 30 or 45-day process, and so it's just all hands on deck, working through it. And then you have sites like you mentioned, like we have some in Houston where they're path to growth sites. They're ways out. They have some significant development issues like major easements and, just challenges where we know, okay, there's a deal here, but it's everybody's not going to want this deal. It's going to take a special group who's able to work through the different challenges, who has patience. And so we'll talk as much as they want to talk, but we may not need to be talking, every day or every week or even every other week. Because the market for that kind of a property just isn't moving, that quickly.
Yeah, that's good. So, I think those are probably the three things, if I'm a land seller, that I'm thinking about before going to market. And then if you've selected the right broker at the beginning, things change throughout the marketing process. And so just staying in constant communication is going to be really important to understand like what is happening and changing in the market. We've been through enough cycles to know that, you have all those meetings and you do those POVs, and 2 months later, you could be in a completely different market because interest rates went up, or there's a tariff situation, or like oil tanked in Houston, or, something happened that was significant. And it's worth sitting down again with your broker and talking about, because of this impact of what's happening, should we change our expectations, or, are we kind of continuing on as usual?
Yeah, it's interesting is I think it's really important to have a little bit of patience and let the market speak. Let the market assess the property and hear what the market has to say about it and be open to that. Because I think a lot of times sellers will think that like the broker decides the price or something, like we decide the value or we make the deal happen at a certain price. And all we're doing is facilitating the market. We're exposing the property to the market. We're trying to make sure the market has a chance to honestly look at the property. The right buyers have seen it, they understand all the nuances of it, and then they make a decision on it one way or another. And we can't really control, we can push them and we can try and create competition. And there's ways to get higher prices. But at the end of the day, the market needs to see the property, the market needs to speak. And there's been plenty of times where we go to market and you get a couple of offers early that aren't great offers. And so I was like, what's going on? This is way under what we thought. These are lower offers. And it's like, hey guys, just let's be patient. Like we still have 80% of the market that hasn't responded. We got a couple people that responded, but like let's take our time, make sure we've gone through our process. And that's why I think process is so critical with marketing. What's your process? Like you talked about earlier, is it just putting a sign up? Is it just putting on Craigslist or LoopNet or one of these websites? Or is it actively going out and talking to the market, sharing the pros and cons of the site, making sure the development community understands it, whoever the buyers are that are active, making sure they've seen it and they're looking at it. That's where you really know when the market speaks, if you're getting the best deal you can get, or if you just got some one-off person that happened to see it, but it's not representative of the actual market.
Yeah. And this is, like we said earlier, this is the time to go to market. It would be now, or it would be, in the spring. Those are the two windows where you have everyone coming back from summer right now and ready to invest and looking for projects to close out the year. A lot of the capital that started the year, because the beginning of the year is always a good time because you have capital ready to deploy, but a lot of that capital has not been deployed because of how the year's panned out. And so now is a great time to get your property in the market and to be talking to that capital that needs to be placed. There's a lot of large funds that are coming to the end of their life, just the end of the allowable time to invest. And so you want to be out in front of those funds right now with properties. And so if you're listening and you're a landowner, we do these broker opinion of values all the time for landowners. We have clients that we'll do it for on like a quarterly basis or a couple times a year, just to give them updated values on what their properties are worth. And then, a lot of times that leads directly into us taking those properties out and marketing them. But, we like doing those for landowners just to give a sense of what we're seeing in the market, what we think the value is. And it really is a landowner. It's something that I would be doing all the time, would be meeting with brokers and trying to understand what the value is, because I think there's just so much value in hiring the right broker, taking your property to market, and having the type of advice that we can bring and just the guidance being on your side of the table. I always think about it like you want representation because you want someone sitting on your side of the table. And I always, tell landowners, if I'm bringing the buyer, I have to sit on the other side of the table. I mean, that's where I have to be representing my buyer. So we love sitting on both sides of the table, but when it comes to selling properties, it's a lot of fun because it allows us to broadcast them to a much larger group, a network, that's very strong of qualified buyers that are out looking for deals. And I know it's the same in Houston right now. There's a lot of developers that need projects. It's difficult, but there's a lot of developers that do need projects and want to place capital.
Absolutely. And one thing I think is important to recognize, um, especially if you're new to real estate or you're not used to the land market, the land business is very difficult to price properties or to value them. And a lot of times you can have, 20 to 30% variation in value, especially when you go to these BOVs and people submit their BOVs. And the reason for that is when you look at like the investment sales business or like selling a home, a lot of times you get very dialed in values. It's based on a cap rate or it's based on actual comps that are in that neighborhood. And so it's pretty easy to get some values that really, kind of correspond to each other. Maybe they're within 5% or, maybe 10%, but probably not even 10% of each other. They're really close. in the land business, I mean, a lot of times there's not very good comps around these sites, or the comps don't really apply like we've talked about in the past. There's a lot of different executions that could happen on the site with different types of uses. They could go, maybe it's one use or multiple uses. You could subdivide the property or sell the whole thing. So it's like you said, it's a simple business, but a very complicated business at the same time. And it's not uncommon to have a big variation in pricing that gets proposed for the site. And that's why I think it's important to start asking those questions of why. How is someone getting to their values? Because I think what we do on the land side is a little bit more of an art than maybe the other disciplines where there's just so much data that they can go to.
Yeah, things definitely change on the land side because of the nature of development and how long the projects take. And the assumptions, everyone's trying to see the future, which makes it difficult to peg prices a lot of times. And so having as much information as you can helps, but it is definitely an art trying to value these properties, and it can change. I mean, especially just this year, where we were valuing properties at the beginning of the year, and then 3 months later, and then 3 months later, it's continued to evolve because of big market shifts with like expectations around rates and expectations with tariffs. And then even just here locally in DFW, the impact of the Senate bill on values, that's had a big shift that was not foreseen. Most people weren't even thinking about that until late in Q2. And in some cases, it's increased land values by 100%, within weeks. So that's really hard to see some of these things that can change and can happen. That's why it's important, I think, to build relationships with, good brokers. And you don't have to, if you know a good brokerage, you don't have to go meet with 3 just to meet with 3. I mean, and I think for a lot of brokers, it's frustrating if they just feel like, they're one of 3 and it's I need to like share my business or meet with a lot of different people. I think that advice is more if you're, if you just don't know, it's going to be valuable to meet with several. If you have good relationships, I would just try to stay in really close communication to understand what's going on in the market. Because it'll also save you a lot of time, not have to interview a lot of people, but staying in the know on what's going on in the market is going to be very valuable.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great.
Well, I think this is good, Tim. We're going to have some guests joining us here in upcoming episodes here pretty soon, which we're really excited about. We had Eric and Jason on earlier in the year and had great feedback from that and really enjoyed having them on. We've had David and Tripp and Trey, and some of the other DMRE guys on. We're going to have more of our DMRE team on here over the coming months as well. So really looking forward to that. Looking forward to this busy fall season, kind of the second half of the year, and everything that we're projecting to happen here.
Yeah, I'm excited about the interviews. We've been kind of holding back our audience a little bit, but we have some great developer relationships and what have become close friendships over the decades now, and people we really respect in the business that I think are real authority on what they do and are just interesting people. Just not even just with business, just their life and personal decisions they're making and the way they're leading their life and leading their teams and the organizations they're a part of. So we've been kind of growing this podcast and practicing with each other and kind of getting better and better, hopefully, and working on the production quality and all that. But as we go forward, we'll still be doing these talks with me and you, but also doing a lot more interviews because we think that's going to really be valuable for our audience.
Well, Tim, come crash the Park City leadership meeting.
That'd be fun.
It'd be fun to have you pop in.
I'm always up for the mountains, so that'd be fun.
All right. Thanks for recording today.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tom. Bye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.